Hi and welcome to PolyOriginals with Fiona Abel-Smith. So today we're going to have some fun and we're going to create some really sweet little coasters using just polymer clay. We're going to use a new cane which I've designed for you, and I'm going to call this one Ribbon Burst because we've got like the look of the little ribbon going through and then a burst of something bright in the background. I've done it all in blues, but obviously you can choose whichever colour scheme you want. It's a relatively easy cane, although it looks quite complex, just 3 main elements and then we push them together. But this is one of those canes, you know me, every time I do it, it would probably come out slightly differently. And if yours comes out slightly differently, don't worry, that's fine. You'll have roughly the same look if you've got this main element in, which we go into details for later on, and that just brings that to the fore and sends the rest to the back, which is the main bit about this cane. And of course, one important thing to say is this is polymer clay, which burns at quite a low temperature, so these are not suitable for things directly out of an oven or things sort of above boiling temperature. But for soft drinks, even sort of cups of coffee or tea, they're absolutely fine, and also plant pot holders, yes, things to put small things on, but all of those, they are absolutely fine. So let's start by going through the equipment you need for today's project. The equipment we need is fairly straightforward today. A polymer clay blade. I often refer to these as tissue blades, and you want one that's going to be able to have a curve in it, so something you can, so not completely flexible, but one of sort of the in-between blades, so not a rigid one, so you can get a bit of a curve on it. A craft knife, something like this cable needle. I use this both to create a groove and also to manoeuvre the slices of cane together when we put them together to create a veneer. Roller. Polymer clay, this one's about 1/2 inch, 1.25 centimetres wide, and I also use a brayer roller. If you've got one of those, it's nice to go over the top of your finished veneer with. When we create the veneer, I'm going to use a piece of wax paper. You could also use greaseproof, tracing, baking, parchment, anything like that, just to put over the top of the clay so that when we smooth and burnish the top, it doesn't distort the clay. And to burnish, I'm going to use one of these, which is a stainless steel soap. If you don't have one of these, then you could simply use your roller or even find a nice big pebble. When I'm reducing my cane, I'm going to get it to a certain size, so I use a measuring sheet for this. This one is freely downloadable from www.printablepaper.net, and this is the 4 squares to 1 inch. You can also get it in centimetres, and I've just laminated mine because I can then use it many times. To create the hexagon coasters, I'm going to use some of these stencils. Now, these are the staggered stencil sets from PC UK Tools, and I'll put a link to those in the details below the video. However, you can just also use a piece of paper, and although I have used the stencil here to draw around to create the size, and I'll go into greater detail about what we're doing here later on in the video, you can just download or find anywhere a hexagon shape, draw your lines, doesn't matter what size it is, because however the lines go, we're then going to measure to get the size of your hexagon coaster. So a piece of paper, a pencil and a ruler, definitely handy. I'll go into the coloured clay I'm going to use in just a moment, but as well as that, I'm going to use an awful lot of scrap clay because I'm building up the size and thickness of my coasters with scrap clay. Later on in the video, I give you lots of alternatives, possible options to choose from if you don't have a lot of scrap clay. But if you do have scrap clay, then I reckon I'm using probably getting on to about one of those small packets of clay, so probably about sort of 56 grams of clay per coaster that I'm making. So it's a fair amount of scrap clay that we're going to use. Other than that, on the tool side, you will need a pasta machine dedicated to polymer clay use, and then something like biodegradable wet wipes or wet cloths to clean your hands and equipment as you go along, and then I just use some tissues just to dry off if I've used any of the wet things. If you don't have a pasta machine, then you can always get yourself a pack of playing cards and stack equal number of playing cards either side of the clay, roll it in between until it gets to the level of the playing cards, and that's a good alternative. I showed you the scrap clay, so let's move on to the actual coloured clay we're going to use to create the cane in these colours today. For today's project I'm using Fimo Soft, but all recognised brands of polymer clay will work well for this technique and this cane. So I'm going to run through the colours first, then I'll go through the amounts, and then we'll split them up into what you need to create the elements of the cane we're doing today. So we've got white, brilliant blue, Windsor blue, peppermint, calypso and plum. And for the white, we've got 1 2/3 of an ounce or 49 grams. For the brilliant blue, we've got 1 1/4 ounces or 35 grams. For the Windsor blue, we've got 1 ounce or 28 grams. The peppermint, 1/3 of an ounce or 21 grams. And then for the plum and the calypso, we've got 1/2 ounce or 14 grams. And we're going to split them up to make various Skinner blends. I would suggest cutting your clay up into these sizes because we're going to do a Skinner blend with these 3, white, peppermint and plum, Skinner blend with these 3, white, brilliant blue and calypso, and a Skinner blend with these 2, white and the brilliant blue. That leaves us with small pieces of the brilliant blue, the peppermint and the white, so they can be conditioned and just rolled up into a sausage or a log. And I would suggest conditioning the 2 blue pieces in that sort of size because that gives you a nicer amount just to condition when you're conditioning using the pasta machine. I'm going to condition all of these colours thoroughly in these particular sizes, and all of these, apart from these 3, will be put through a setting on the pasta machine to give me a nice sheet. For all the ones we're doing for the Skinner blend, a roughly oblong or rectangular sheet is good. You'll see what we're doing as we get to that stage. And with these 2, we just need a thinner coating, so these are going to go through on setting number 7. Now on my machine, 0 is thick and 9 is thin, so these go through on a medium setting and these go through fairly thin. And as I said, those can just go as a little log or a sausage when they've been completely conditioned. And I'll bring you back when I've got all that done, and we'll start with the Skinner blend with these 3 colours. I've conditioned the plum, the peppermint and the white and put them through, as I mentioned, on setting number 3 and got them into rough rectangular shapes. And we're going to do a Skinner blend from the white through to the peppermint through to the plum. For anyone who hasn't done a Skinner blend before, I do have a video with a few tips and techniques, and I'll put a link to that in the description below this one if you wanted to hop across and have a look at how to do a Skinner blend. But for everyone else who already knows, we're just going to cut diagonally down through the end pieces, straight down the middle piece, and double these ones up and put them together just roughly, because as we know in the pasta machine it all changes slightly, so you don't need to be too neat at this stage. I'm going to push them down so they adhere, fold them in half, create a bit of a pinch that makes it easier to go through the pasta machine. I'm going to put it through that end first, and each time collect and fold to the top and keep putting through fold first. And because I've now got 4 layers on setting number 3, I'm going to go up to 1 thicker setting on my pasta machine, so setting number 2, and I'll bring you back when we've got that nice blend through the whole of those colours. When we've got that nice blend, I'm just going to cut it into 2, put the 2 sides on top of each other, pinch to the ends, and I'm going to put it back through the pasta machine to give myself a longer strip on that same setting number 2. And now I need to create the longest, thinnest strip I can using my pasta machine, so I'm going to put it through the dark end first again, and I'm going to go straight down to my thinnest usable setting, which on my pasta machine is 9. But if you know that your pasta machine shreds or tears the clay as it goes down, go down 1 setting at a time until you get to your thinnest usable setting. So now we have our nice long strip, and all I'm going to do is I'm going to roll it up from the white end upwards. Now I've got quite a bit of residue on the underneath of mine because the clay was collecting, because the clay was quite soft today. I'm not worried about that, it's not going to show in the final piece, so don't worry too much if that happens with yours. If you do get larger pieces, just take those out. I've just been cleaning my pasta machine, so sometimes it means some of the clay dislodges in the next couple of times you use it. Right, so very simply roll, and all I'm going to do is roll it nice and tight, making sure there's no air trapped as we go. Having got that done, we're going to create the first element of our design very similar to how I've done this lots of other times in other videos, so many of you will be used to this. We're going to quarter this, and I do it by carefully cutting down through. It doesn't matter if your quarters don't go straight, but obviously if you can get them straight, it would have a better overall look. And then all we're going to do is pull up each of the sides so that dark clay goes slightly up across our section, and then we're going to squidge. And by that all I mean is I'm going to press down on the sides as I go down, and I find it easier to do this flat on the work surface, pressing up the sides so it becomes narrower at the bottom, and repeat that for all 4 pieces. And then 2 at a time, put your pieces together and press just in at the bottom. And then finally press 4 bits together again, just at the bottom. And then I'm going to pull over the top, just to create more of a triangular shape. So mine's quite long at the moment, so it's probably about sort of 2.5 getting on for 3 inches, and I want it quite a bit shorter than that, so just with the heel of my thumb I'm going to press it shorter, because I want more of a squat one, because I'm not going to chop this in 2. We're going to keep this pattern exactly as it is now, and I'll show you what it's like in a moment when I chop the end off of it. But what we want to do now is just cover most of it in a layer of the dark clay. So as I mentioned before, the dark blue clay has gone through a thin setting, so setting number 7 on my pasta machine. I'm simply going to lay that piece on top, chop a piece that's the right width, chop one end off nice and neat, and then not right from the start, but about 1/3 of the way up one side, I'm going to roll over and put the clay all the way around, and then chop off the excess, again about 1/3 of the way up that side. With our little bits of extra blue clay, put them together into a nice sausage, making sure there's no air trapped inside. Roll it nice and thin. Take your cable needle and create a groove along the back of this piece, just big enough to fit a piece of that in. And now we're going to change the shape of this one slightly. We're going to want to add quite a large bit of blue. So take the rest of this blue, and with your rolling pin, put your rolling pin up against the edge of this shape and just press that side down, so we're creating quite a bit of a curve around the rolling pin. Okay, and then using this we're just going to create a nice long log to fill in a bit of that curve. So it only needs to be a half circle. So I'm just pressing down with my thumb and finger to create more of a triangular point, and then just smoothing it over the top. So you've got a little bit of a semicircle in there, and we're going to put that in all the way down that side, chop off the excess. And then the last thing we're going to do is, away from the side where we've just added that corner, we are going to pull this corner up and round. We're going to create a bit of a curve in there. Now, as I said before, you can follow what I'm doing, or you can do exactly your own thing. There's no right or wrong to this. It's however it comes out, however it turns out. But what we're looking for what I'm doing at the moment, is a shape where you've got a raised bit like that. And if I just chop through the end so we can see what we've got, you can see that the pattern's revealed there. This bit's going to come down in a point, because this is going to be one of the corners of our triangle. So once you've got a nice point on it, That piece can go on one side because that is the first element of our design done. Element 2 involves another skinner blend, this time with the white, the brilliant blue and the calypso, and again as before I've put those through on setting number 3. We're going to create a skinner blend exactly the same way as we just did, all the way down to where it's that nice long thin sheet that I put through setting number 9 on my pasta machine, and you'll have put through on your thinnest usable setting. So I will get it through all the way to that stage and then bring you back and I'll show you what we do in that stage. Don't roll it up this time, that's where this one differs. So there we go, and this time we're going to concertina it. So starting from, it doesn't matter which end you start from, I'm going to start from the white. I'm just going to fold it backwards and forwards, so it's probably about just under an inch, about 2–2.5 centimetres wide. When I was going, I was trying to make sure I wasn't trapping too much air, if hardly any at all if possible, down the folds as I went. So I was going to press on the ends just to neaten it slightly, and we want to form this into a triangle where the white is the point and the darker calypso blue clay is the flat bottom. So at the moment we just want it roughly in triangular shape, because we're now going to cover this with a layer of the thin dark blue. So I'm taking my second sheet of the dark blue, which again was put through on setting 7. And this time we're going all the way around the outside of this one. Again, smooth it as you go to make sure there's no air trapped inside, and cut off the excess. And this time, where the white point is, we're going to take our cable needle and create a groove in here. Take some of the excess peppermint clay, remember the 2 little bits we had, they've been conditioned and put into a roll. And I'm going to use probably about half of that and get it nice and thin to sit in that groove. Okay, and now we can make it back into more of a pointed triangle, but that light blue peppermint will be the point of our triangle. Now I want this to be 2 different pieces in our design, one larger than the other, so at this stage I'll chop it probably about 1/3, 2/3. So the larger piece with that nice blue in the middle, I'm going to take my finger and create a groove. Take some of the brilliant blue from that extra 2 piece that we had to one side, and again roll this, and this time you can use all of this piece. Roll it until it fits inside the groove, use however much you need. Compress that one into place, and then all you need to do is make sure it's the same height as your first piece, so this one needs to be extended a bit first. And because we're doing a kaleidoscope, you're trying to make sure that this end is the same size and proportionate as that end. And it's roughly the same size, as I say, as your first piece. So just because I'm showing you what our pattern looks like. So that's that piece, and that's that piece. So those are 2 pieces done. And then this smaller piece, we're going to do the same, but this time we're going to put a little piece of the white in from the 2 pieces of excess white we had. So I don't need very much of this, so probably just under 1/2 of that. But again, roll it out until it fits in the groove, curl it up, and as before, make it the same height as our other two pieces, so it's going to fit into our design. And that is the second element of the design finished. Our third element is another Skinner blend, but this time nice simple, just the two colours. So simply go diagonally down through both, double them up, put them together, fold, and as before, put back through the pasta machine. And I'm going to repeat exactly the same process with this one, getting it nicely blended and then getting it down to a nice long thin strip in my thinnest usable setting, and I'll bring you back when we've got to that stage. So there we go, I've got my piece done. This time we're going to concertina it again, but I'm going to start very, very thinly with the white end and then get bigger as I go towards the blue, because I'm trying to end up with a very thin triangular cane. If you don't want to do this, you can just do it square, as we did in the previous one, and then just force it into a triangle afterwards. That would also work. You get a slightly different look to the way that the colours in the cane move, but it still works just as well if you find that easier. So as you can see, I'm just getting slightly wider now as I go down. Mine always look wonky because I'm exerting more pressure on the side that I'm holding it on, but that side will press down just as quickly and easily, and then I'm just pinching it, and I will straighten up the ends to give myself a nice long thin triangle. Once you're happy with your size and shape, and this doesn't have to be any particular size or shape, as I say, I'm just showing you some of the elements I used to make my cane pieces. We are just again going to cover this in a layer of the dark blue. So what I did, I took all my leftover pieces of dark blue and put them back together to create a new sheet. As before, chop one end off neatly and then just cover this completely in the blue. If your piece isn't quite big enough, then as we go around, we're just going to stretch it ever so gently. And then it should fit. And as with the previous piece, I want at least 2 pieces of this, depending on how much you've got. You might want to make 3 pieces. I want to keep one piece quite large because that's going to cut through the whole of the design and be our overlaying piece, the one that gives that interest and makes it look more sort of almost 3-dimensional. But I also want a smaller piece. So again, probably about 1/3, 2/3. And as before, I'm going to find the size of our previous canes and make sure these go to the same size. So I want this one to stay the same sort of width as this, so I'm just going to make it much thinner, so I'm going to spread it out this way. And this one, I'm not worried about it being so long and thin, it can be smaller, so again, just do whatever you want to do. So here are our 5 pieces finished, all ready to go in the design, and here are the leftover bits of the colours. So I've got some blue, white, some peppermint and some dark blue, and all we're simply going to do is put these together in a way that looks pleasing for the type of cane we are going to make. I'm keeping this one off to one side for a moment because, as I say, once we put this cane together, he's going to cut right through the others. And as I've mentioned before, you don't have to do exactly the same as me. This is just a suggestion, so do whatever comes to your mind as you are doing it. You're cane pieces might make you decide to do something else entirely. But I'm going to do one there, that one there. I think we will do him coming across there. But the other thing to do when you're having fun and putting canes together is just to curl some of the pieces, change the shape of them. So we'll change the shape of him to fit in there. If he's going to go, he'll pull more down here to make him go longer. This, let's change this, let's pull this up and around. And if you're finding it difficult to pull things around, then don't forget to use your roller. It gives you a start, and then you can elongate and pull a shape out. And we're just making them fit together in an interesting way. So let's put him so he actually fits in and along that side there, so they overlap. He can sort of curl. Let's have him so he curls in there. We can infill, don't forget, in the back here with pieces. And let's have him as a corner and then just curve all the way down this side. Right, so let's see about infilling some of these pieces then. So we've got a curve on there to make a corner. So let's infill him with a bit of peppermint. And you can always go back and get more clay if you need to at this stage, if you find you haven't quite got enough. There's no rules as to sticking to the amount of clay. You can always add another extra colour if you want to, for a little pop of some additional interest. So let's put him inside there, so they're going to sit together like that. He's going to be one side, and then we've got quite a large bit in the middle here. So let's do dark to start with. Actually, I'm going to infill the outside bits first. So I'm going to put a bit of white, or shall I do blue? Let's do some blue. Let's do some blue down the outside of this curved piece. So as before, put your clay back together, make sure there's no holes in it. You can always, if you want to, find a little extra bit of your dark colour from your offcuts. Him to fit in there. So let's put a little bit of white up against this piece, and we are just going to make these fit. So we're going to squidge, and we're going to push, and we're going to press, and there's no real rhyme or reason to it. You're just going to make it fit the gap. So let's take the dark and put him in the middle here. And we'll keep him at the moment as a roll. Pull him longer, and then we will just push this in until it's going to go roughly in place. Let's pull him round. Actually, let's pull him right round there so he fits in there, and then these bits can go there, because don't forget we've still got this piece to go through the middle. Okay, so let's sit him in there, and then we need to decide where we want this piece to be. Now he's going to curve, so let's put our curve on him now. And let's just see where we think would look quite good. Okay, so I think for this one, we'll have him coming in from this side. So wherever you want him to be, because these tissue blades are curved, you can set him on top. I find it easier just to mark roughly with a craft knife where I want the curve to be. You don't have to do it as extreme as you had him curved, but when you've decided where you're going to go with your craft or with your tissue blade, very carefully press down through the whole cane and add your curved piece in, and then fit the other piece back on the side, trying to make sure that as carefully as you can that the patterns sort of match up, and do check top and bottom. So for instance, that needs readjusting around there so that fits in there. And then it's just whether you've got any gaps and any leftover clay. The other thing you can do is you can take all your leftover scraps of clay, run them through on the pasta machine, and you'll quite often get quite a nice subdued colour, but one that would match in with your cane if you wanted to add an extra couple of little pieces on the side. I'm not overly bothered. I'm just going to put a little piece of blue down on that gap there, and then I'm going to force the rest of it into a straight line. So I'm just creating a little triangular piece with my fingers by doing that as I go down. So we'll put him in there. And that will actually be our cane done. So all I'm going to do now is I'm going to create more of the points. So this is a point, and that is a point, and then I'm going to start reducing the cane, and by that I mean that I'm going to pull it longer whilst gently pressing in, and each time I do it I'm going to rotate, so we will end up with each side being exactly the same width across the bottom, and we will end up with an equilateral triangle with a pattern of our cane in between. So I'll fast forward through this bit, but you'll see what I'm doing as I go along. Normally I'd reduce this a lot more to get it right down to the size I want, but because I know some of you might want to have the big pattern in your coasters rather than doing small, I will chop through now so we see the pattern, and then we can decide at this point how small or big we want our cane to be. So that would be one pattern. That'll be another way. And that will be the third way. And you see what I mean about this, having this piece just cutting through it, just really pings it to the front and sends the other pieces obviously behind it. So let's move on to choosing the size of our coaster, and then we can decide what size we need our cane to be. I used one of these hexagons from PC UK Tools, and as I mentioned I'll put a link to them in the details below. I chose one that was roughly the right size that I thought a coaster would be, and just drew around the outside of it and put the 6 lines in. Now you don't need to use one of these, obviously. You can just download a hexagon shape on the internet, or you might have something at home that's already a hexagon shape, and all you need is one, because once you've got those 6 lines in, you can then decide what size is a useful size for you to have your triangles. So I've done these because they happen to be inches or 2.5 centimetres in length, which is quite a nice size to do. And then if you do that, you work out you need 1, 2, 3, 4 in each segment, so 24 slices of the cane to create your full pattern. You could of course just do one large piece of cane. In actual fact, mine isn't far off that at the moment. I've probably gone a little bit smaller, but it's not far off what it would have been. So if you've got this one isn't yet completely equilateral, but you could always keep your piece nice and big and just do 6 slices rather than doing the 24. But I like the idea of them going slightly smaller. So I now know I need to get my cane down until it's 1 inch across all of the sides, or 2.5 centimetres across all of the sides, and then I can start building my coasters from that point. So I will now reduce this down until it's the right size, and here's 1 inch on the measuring sheet that I use. Once the cane's down to size, I just chop off one end neatly and use one of the offcuts to just check that I am more or less on point for size. And now all we need to do is to get the scrap layer of clay for the underneath. Now again, there are loads of different choices you've got here. As I said at the start, I'm choosing to put mine on a layer of scrap clay because I have a lot of scrap clay. You may not have a lot of scrap clay, in which case you could just take slices of these on a very, very thin layer of scrap clay, bake them, and then when the polymer clay is baked, glue it to a piece of hardboard. You can get some nice cork matting, so you can glue it to that. A PVA glue should work normally, and obviously I'm doing this if I'm suggesting you do them for your own use. If you're doing them to sell, then you'd want to sort of think carefully about how long they were going to last and how you would put them all together, but so I'll leave that up to you. But there are lots of different options. You could actually glue them onto an already plain glass coaster if you wanted to do that. So just have a think through what you want to do. But as I mentioned, I do have a lot of scrap clay, so I'm planning on doing mine on a nice thick layer of scrap clay. So that cane's all ready to go. I've checked the size, so now let's get the clay base ready. So I'm just using some old grey clay that I'll just put through the pasta machine, get it nicely conditioned, and then I'll end up putting it through my thickest setting, which is setting number 0 on mine, which will be a thickness of about something like that. If you find that your thickest setting isn't thick enough, you can of course do 2 layers and just roll them on top of each other. So I'll bring you back when I've got mine done. So because I know I'm just going to do mine on scrap clay, I've put my clay through on that nice thick setting, and as you saw, put it flat on a tile, making sure there's absolutely no air trapped underneath, to make sure that I can create on this and I'll bake on this, so I don't need to move it, so the bottom is completely flat. If you do find you've got any air holes, of course just pop them with a little needle or something. So because I know this was the template that was roughly the right size, I'm just going to give myself a bit of a guide. So just with the back end of my craft knife, I'm just scoring where the points are. And then with my ruler I can carefully mark out that same grid as we did before, so I have lines that I can follow when I'm putting my slices down. So there we go, lines all nicely marked out, and I know I can just chop off some of this excess clay as well already, so it's not in the way whilst I am working. So best practice would be to leave your cane for about 20 minutes to rest, so that when you take your slices down it's less likely to pull down when it's nice and soft when you've only just been reducing it. But you know me, I'm not that patient. So I'm going to cut my slices already. So we know we need 24 slices. I will do most of these off screen because when I cut I tend to have my head right over the top so I can see what I'm doing, which doesn't look particularly good on camera. But just to show you, I'll just take a couple. And I'm thinking I'm going to do, my thickness is probably about like that, so that's probably a couple of millimetres, and I'll try and keep them all exactly the same. The most important thing when you're slicing through a cane isn't thick or thin, but it is consistency. So cut a slice that's the good consistency for you. And if you happen to have one of the slicing machines, then they are brilliant. Use one of those. It'll make your life easier. But I'm going to go off screen now and I'll cut 24 of those and I'll bring you back when I have got that done. Okay, so there are my slices. There's my scrap clay ready to go on. I've got my tissue blade and I've also got another one, and this is an old one, and those of you who've seen my videos before will know I use this a lot, sort of to push up against the side of the clay to make it nice and flat and straight. But I have carefully taped over several layers of masking tape so there's no sharp end, so I'm not going to cut my fingers when I use that to do that. So we're going to start by just putting 3 pieces in. So I'm just going to pick 3 up, start marrying those 3 together. If you find it easy to do 2, just do 2 at a time, that's absolutely fine. And with this one we will start by having the white in the middle. So I can just use that blade just to straighten that up. And then I can put it over here. And again, use the blade to straighten up the pieces here. Now, this is because I was impatient and I didn't wait to let it rest. So each slice that I cut, it has gone slightly out of shape, but that's fine. So same with this. Marry the first two up. And then you can check that's going to go that side. So this piece I know needs to go on this end this time. So again, pull that up, twist this one around, and you can gently and carefully match the two areas up, and that's when you start to see your design coming through for the first time. And the other reason I love these stencils so much is because you know it's got a perfect angle on it. So you can take this and with a nice clean finger, if you need to, you can gently push the pieces up, or with the stencil pull them down, so each layer you go round, you know you've got a nice even hexagon. But the first layer's done. Let's move on to the next layer. And for these ones, I will do the middle bit first, figure out where that bit goes, and now I know I need one piece on here and one piece on here. I know that this piece needs to go out to that line because I've already marked that line in place. And I know that this piece needs to come inside the line. And your pieces fit in and fit together. So I'm going to carry on and build round the rest of this piece till we actually end up seeing the whole design. And I'll fast forward that and we'll stop when we've got to the next stage. That's the pattern all put together. So what we need to do now is we need to close up all these joins. So I'm going to take the cable needle, not the point, this bit's up here, and very gently I'm just going to run from one side to the other until I close up the joints. Once you're closed, you can then just sort of rub over, and again it's actually this bit, the wider bit, I'm going over, not the points, I'm not digging in. And I will do that around the whole of the piece. And as before, I'm not going to keep you here watching me do it because that's relatively boring to watch, but I will bring you back when we get to the next part of the neatening stage. Once I've joined up all the slices, so there's no gaps in between them, we've got quite an uneven surface, so I'm going to get a piece of wax paper, and I use a stainless steel soap, but just very gently from the middle, working out in small circles. I'm just going to go over the whole piece, making sure it's nice and smooth. I'm going to try and not push out the edges too much, because I don't want to splay the clay over the edge. But I want to make sure it's lovely and smooth. Once I've done it all over, I'm just going across in lines. And then I'm just going to work very gently from the outside in so that the paper sticks to the clay. Because then, if you get something like the brayer roller or your ordinary roller, when you roll over it, because the clay is already sticking, it's not going to spread out quite as much. I'm just going to feel with my fingers, so I want lovely smooth, and then you can peel off. And at this stage I will use one of the larger templates, and again just go over those edges, pressing to make sure that they are nice and the right shape and size. If you find that it's pushed up too much, you can go back in and just very gently roll it towards the middle. But I think I'm more or less okay. And then just do a last neaten up of the edges. Now I know the angles are okay. And then I'm simply going to press down to create the edge of our coaster. And there is our coaster ready to bake. So what I'm going to do is, because I want to make sure this stays nice and flat in the oven, so I'm going to get another tile and place it upside down over the top. Now I'm going to sand and polish this, so I'm not worried about there being any shiny bits on the top of my coaster. If, however, you were planning on leaving it just plain, then you could simply put a piece of card in between, and that will mean you won't get any shiny parts on the clay. But I'm not going to, so I'm just going to put that on there like that. And because it's nicely sandwiched, I don't even need to worry about any burning or anything, because that gives quite a bit of protection, the two tiles like that. And I will bake that according to the manufacturer's instructions for the brand of clay I am using, and I'll bring you back when we've got this one out of the oven. Once it's out of the oven, take the top tile off, and then waiting for it to cool slightly, you should be able to gently run your blade underneath and release it from the tile. And there is your coaster finished. So it's completely up to you what you do this stage. As I said, you can leave it completely like that and it is finished. I do like to sand and polish mine, so I will start doing that. When I sand and polish, always wear rubber gloves or something similar to protect your hands. And I use 240, 600, 1000, 1500 and up to 2000, and that's the wet dry sandpaper and the grits for that. And I'll start at the lowest one, so start at the 240 and just work my way up. Once it's finished, you can use an unstitched polishing mop, either on a handheld thing like a Dremel or on a bench grinder where you've got the large polishing mops on the end, and I will show you what that's like when I bring it back. Of course, there are other alternates. You could varnish it. So just make sure you're using a varnish which is then suitable to use as a coaster with hot mugs, if you're planning on using it for that sort of thing. You could, of course, put a nice topping of resin on. The DeepShine from Teresa Salgado's tiny Pandora boutique is a really good one to use. You need the UV lamp to cure that one. You could also create a nice hard sort of paper collar around the outside which stands up nice and straight, and put a little bit of resin in, the sort that's a two-part mixing one that dries over a couple of days, and create a resin top. You could always just put a clear layer of polymer clay over the top, a very thin one, and rebake it and then sand and polish. So many different things, so many different toppings. If you want a whole load of great advice on how to finish pieces like this and all the various options there are and what you can do with them, then you can't go wrong going across to The Blue Bottle Tree and Ginger Davis Allman, and I will put the links to her site down below. She also has some lovely little booklets, some articles for free and some you can buy from her, on how to sand and polish things as well and how to get the best effects. Okay, I'm now going to go and sand and polish this one. I'm also going to create the other two patterns, so effectively the one with that in the middle and then the one with that in the middle. So we have 3 different pattern coasters, and we have enough in the cane we made to actually make 8 coasters. Not that I'm planning to do that, because obviously I want to get the tutorial finished. And you can of course use this for something entirely different. It don't have to be coasters at all. Just do whatever you want to do and choose what you want to do with your cane. So there's our finished coaster. So it's sanded and polished, so it's got a nice shine on it. I've left the back completely plain, but just added some of the little coaster feet, and you can buy these easily in shops or online. I've just chosen the small ones. So I've just added the feet. I've done 6 round the side, 1 in the centre, just to give a bit of extra strength for when the cup is put on top of it. You could, of course, add something to the back. You could varnish it, you could paint it, you could wax it, you could add gilder's paste to give it a nice metallic finish. But because it's going to be the underneath, because I've put the feet on it, I'm quite happy with it being completely plain. And of course, if you wanted to decorate the back, you could even have a different pattern on the underneath to make them double-sided coasters, whatever you want to do. So there's pattern number 1. That's having this bit in the middle. And that was with that bit in the middle. So I know you saw them right at the start, but this just gives you the option to decide which bit you want to start with and which piece you want to have in the middle. So there we are, that's the project finished. So I've just done these 3 because these are the patterns, and if I was going to do a set, I'd probably do a set of 6 with 2 of each design. Well, I hope you enjoyed that one. I hope you have fun with it. So don't stress over it. Don't worry if your pattern comes out slightly differently. I'm sure it will look lovely. I know I do normally give you different colour options, but you know what? I just really liked this one in the blue, so I'm sticking to the blue this time, but I would love to see which colour options you come up with. Thanks so much for watching, and a special thank you to those of you who subscribe. I really do appreciate it. Okay, I'm off to have more fun, probably create a pen and a bauble, and hopefully I'll see you next time. Bye for now. Bye.